Welcome, everybody, back to another edition of Virtue's Brand of Wrestling right here on the BigVitoBrand.com. And I am Virtue right here in my Lex Luthor for President. Yet I have a Batman poster behind me and a Hollywood Hogan doll. Yeah, and a Cleveland Indians hat. But I'm being joined once again by my co-host, the remarkable Robbie Vice. What up?
Man, I'm feeling remarkable because we had some amazing news that I am way more excited about than you are. And just as an off-record comment, I thought you were wearing a Lex Express shirt, and I was going to be a little upset. But man, I'm doing great.
That'd be funny. I wish I had one. I like the narcissist.
Yeah.
But I didn't. Once it became Lex Express, I was like, oh my God.
It was lame, yeah.
All right, the big news today. This is what this whole 20 or 30 minutes discussion is going to be about. WWE. Now, Paul Heyman's already working for them. They announced him as basically head of television for Raw, more or less. I don't know the official title.
Something like that, yeah.
But I mean, he's done it before for SmackDown back in the early 2000s. But so not a shock. And we're going to talk in depth about my thoughts on this. But the biggest shock is Eric Bischoff. And he's getting SmackDown, which is going to Fox. And yes, we know Eric Bischoff worked for WCW. We know he manipulated Ted Turner's checkbook. Okay? He had a successful show that beat Monday Night Raw for 83 weeks. Is that the right number? 83?
I believe that's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. When Nitro was on TNT. But what happened with ECW and what happened with WCW? The two main power figures there responsible for everything. Both of those companies fizzled out and went out of business and succumbed to WWF and Vince McMahon. Now Vince has these two guys that were once his competitors in the Attitude Era. And I wouldn't say ECW was a competitor. That was like a silent partner. They are now running his two main shows. So what's your thoughts? Who do you want to talk about? Let's break this up. Who do you want to talk about first?
I want to talk about Eric Bischoff because I love me some Eazy-E. So Eric Bischoff, the person, the human being, has done questionable things, and he is not a morally great person. But Eric Bischoff, the on-screen character, was responsible for some of my favorite wrestling of the late 90s. So I want to talk about that. The other thing I will say, though, is part of the downfall of Eric Bischoff was giving too much creative control to his friends, right? I mean, that was a big downfall of WCW. Gave it to Nash.
Two downfalls. He overspent.
Yes. Glacier, right? I mean, he did a lot of things that didn't really make sense. But now he has, much like Vince Russo, he has that filter back and forth with Vince McMahon. And I think if Vince lets Heyman and Bischoff go and just filter it with a little sprinkled in Triple H, I think it could be a better product. Is it going to be better overnight? No. Are people overreacting just like the Bruce Pritchard hiring? Yes, they are. But the product right now, in my opinion, isn't awful and unwatchable, but it's not working. And they need a change. And this is something that, if is done right, can go in the right direction. So I know you're not a big fan of Eric Bischoff, the person, but you're not even remotely intrigued by having him and Paul E. Dangerously going head-to-head in the same company to hopefully bring some new life into this?
No, because they're figureheads. They're figureheads. Look, Bruce Pritchard came along and nothing's changed. They hired Jeff Jarrett. Road Dogg was in charge. Nothing's changed. It doesn't matter what these people do. Vince McMahon at the end changes it. The only person that really pushed back to Vince McMahon, and Vince listened, and maybe it's because his back was against the wall when Bischoff had WCW thriving, was Vince Russo. Now, Vince Russo has made it clear he does not want to work like traveling and doing what he used to do and meeting at Vince McMahon's house and sitting at the dining room table. Now, he said, would he love to be a consultant and sit from home on Skype and being meetings that way and give them writing that way? Yeah, absolutely. To me, this is the perfect opportunity now, and then I'm going to talk about Bischoff, for AEW to hire Vince Russo as a consultant and to let it be known. I'm serious about this. No more secrets like in TNA when Russo was in TNA and Dixie Carter wanted to keep it a secret. Because let's be honest, if the Attitude Era people are now all like literally coming back and WWE, I mean, why do they announce these things? Because it's publicly traded? No, because they want to create a buzz. So, but we're not talking about Russo because he's podcasting right now. He's not even in the business. Mostly his choice. I mean, sure, he's been blackballed a little bit, but Bischoff, the biggest con of them all, the biggest scumbag as a human being. And that's when I think of wrestling business, carny level, Eric Bischoff is right at the top of the list. Right there. I tweeted this earlier, Rob, maybe even more sinister and evil than Vince McMahon himself. Okay. Now, on screen, Bischoff's great. He plays a compelling heel authority figure. Never could look at that guy's face and see a good guy. I don't think we're going to get that. When he was with WWE early 2000s, we got that, right? I think that these guys, Heyman and Bischoff, are figureheads. I think they're in place to troll the wrestling community. I still think everything's going to go through Vince McMahon as the main filter, with Stephanie and Triple H as a secondary, and Shane as a secondary filter, and just appointing or anointing Bischoff. And I think it's more storyline than anything. I mean, it might be legit in the books, but literally think about it. WCW's guy that led them to the promised land is now writing SmackDown, which is going to Fox. ECW's guy, Heyman, that made that one of the biggest cult, if not the biggest cult following in wrestling history, is now going to be the figurehead of Raw. To me, this is a storyline to lead to, whoever said this to me on social media, WCW versus ECW at Survivor Series. And I'm sure somehow the McMahons will get their WWE faction. Here we go all over again, the invasion.
Well,
Bischoff, I don't buy this with Bischoff. Like, to me, they can't bring anything to the table unless Vince McMahon steps away. And he's not going to. So I think as big of a scumbag as Bischoff is, he's just there to collect the payday. And Heyman just took an extra job to get a little bit extra money. If it's even jobs.
Well, let me ask you this then. Because your reaction is what a lot of people expect you to be, because you've been very vocal about it. Why don't we take this and spin it a little bit? What is best case scenario for Eric Bischoff? What is the best case scenario you see changing? And in a perfect world, what does this hiring do?
I don't even know. I mean, what's he going to do? Is he going to sit there? Bischoff cannot put together a wrestling show like a script. That's something like a Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara, even a Paul Heyman were great at. Bischoff is more like Vince. They look at a script and then they do their tweaks, right? And this is documented. People have there are people that have said this is how it happens, and Bischoff never refuted it. So I don't know exactly what this new title means. I mean, I guess he's going to be schmoozing it up with the people at Fox. Okay, what experience does he have? He schmoozed it up with Ted Turner at TNT. Okay, he schmoozed it up a little bit with Spike when he was in TNA, but come on, that was minor leagues at that point. But now he's going to be in these big executive meetings with Fox, and I think that it's just Vince McMahon putting a pawn in place that he can tell Fox, hey, I got the guy in charge of this show that's going to be on your network that you're paying all this money to me for. He had ratings beating my company for 83 weeks. Back in the day. Now that he's using it as a level of Vince McMahon is using Bischoff as a pawn. Okay. I don't know if I think the same thing with Heyman, which we'll talk about in the second half of this video. What do you think about me saying that? That's kind of what I feel initially.
Look, and we can discuss this till we're blue in the face, and you've already said it. It can only go as far as Vince's leash allows him to go, right? Now, with the possibility, and what speculation I've read is saying that Eric Bischoff and Heyman are being pushed up in this because Triple H is taking a more active role in indie wrestling, scouting, NXT, and possibly Evolve. And Vince is going to be sinking a lot of his time into his soon-to-be failed football thing. So, we might get something like back in the day, because wasn't Heyman in charge of SmackDown the last time XFL happened? Wasn't he doing more writing back then when it was like really good?
It was, yeah.
So I'm looking at this as a best case scenario. Eric Bischoff can take SmackDown and do something with it that it hasn't happened in a while, because maybe Vince's infinite gaze is going to be shifted, and it's not just going to be shifted between Raw and SmackDown. He lost XFL. He failed XFL. And anything we know about Vince McMahon and his ego, that has to eat him. It eat at him so much that he spent another $1 billion to do it again. So I think he's actually going to be really focused on his football league, and we might see these two guys have a little bit of a longer leash to kind of hopefully make something happen. I think that's best case scenario.
At least Vince was smart enough to get the $1 billion from Saudi Arabia to basically start the XFL.
And that basically funded his XFL. Yeah.
Yes, he's throwing the blood money into the XFL, and if he loses it, oh well. But so I don't buy this Eric Bischoff thing. I just feel like it's a gimmick. Him and Heyman in these spots, to me, are gimmicks. I mean, we've already kind of heard through the grapevine that all these guys are in on creative meetings. Bruce Pritchard, Michael Hayes, Jeff Jarrett. I know Road Dogg's doing something different now, so he's out of the mix. Paul Heyman's kind of always been there. Now you're bringing Eric Bischoff in there, and it's just old school name recognition that Vince McMahon's using, just like he uses The Undertaker, because they had 4,500 ticket sales for Stomping Grounds. Next thing you know, Undertaker is at Extreme Rules because he wants to sell a couple thousand more tickets to the Undertaker marks. Yeah. This is how Vince McMahon operates. He brings back old names to get the buzz going. And so when the internet blew up about this morning, I'm sitting there thinking, Jesus Christ. Like, you know what I mean? I just wish they could keep things secret and we didn't have to know this. But I know they're publicly traded, so we would have found out anyway, right? Because you kind of have to know publicly traded companies' employees and what they do. So right. I don't know. Like, to me, Bischoff, I'm hoping failure for him. He's rich. He's a millionaire. He doesn't need to do this. To me, he's greedy, and they did contact him, to be honest with you. He could have said, no, I have nothing to prove, nothing to do, but he comes back because ego, and he's probably not going to give a shit, right? He knows he can give minimal effort, make it seem like it's way better, and he's going to get a couple $1 million. I mean, I hate Eric Bischoff, but that's why he's rich, because he's a carny. And it is what it is. Now, with that said, what's that?
He's a salesman at heart.
Now, with that said, Heyman has, to me, had some good success as a lead writer in WWE, and I don't know why they ever pulled that away. Now, if you don't remember, back in like 2002, they were going to rehire Vince Russo. Vince Russo was literally back in the company for 2 weeks. Right? This was when WCW was finally gone. This was just before TNA started. Russo was going to be the head writer again, but under Stephanie, right? And instead of just directly under Vince. And one conference call with Stephanie, Russo said, I can't do this, and he left. So for anybody that hates Russo, he could have went back and wrote again for WWE. He left because he did not want to work under Stephanie. Okay? Nobody refuted that. That happened. What did WWE do? Heyman, right around that time, a little bit, was writing SmackDown right about then. And it was pretty good. You know, I'll give him that. It was good. And I believe that's kind of when the class of 2002 kind of started storming up as well. So and JR was still with the company. So they had the tools at their dispense to use. Now it's just a bunch of indie wrestlers that come up through NXT. But I am more intrigued, Rob, about Paul Heyman, because he did successfully have a good run of compelling TV when he did SmackDown back in the day. So so I will say, okay, I want to see what Heyman has to offer. But Bischoff, I am not excited about at all. If anything, I wish Heyman was doing SmackDown. Because now I was so excited to see how that product was going to change for Fox. Now with Bischoff at the helm, it's like I'm going to become anti-SmackDown. Nonetheless, Heyman, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. What's your thoughts on Heyman?
I love Paul E. Dangerously. I remember seeing I think it was on like public access, the commercials for the ECW tapes. You know, my friends and I would go rent them, and his character on TV was fantastic. The stupid ponytail thing, like everything about Paul E. Dangerously was great. So when he went to WWE as Paul Heyman, I loved it. And when he was writing in the early 2000s, it was some of the best TV since the big Monday Night Wars, the highlight of the Monday Night Wars, because he knows what he's doing. He somehow gets the best out of everyone he works with. He basically created Stone Cold Steve Austin. Have you heard the story of the promo in ECW?
All those guys, like all those stints in ECW, like Pillman, Foley, Jericho, Benoit, and look what happened with them.
Absolutely.
So
you know what he did to Austin is he told Austin to get there at about 11 o'clock in the morning or sometime early in the morning and said he was going to go soon. And he kept calling everyone before Austin. Austin was just getting pissed. And like 5 hours later, he goes in there and Austin just starts doing his Texas angry kind of just rant. And that is what became Stone Cold Steve Austin later down the road. And he credits Heyman for that. So I think this is the best possible move that Vince could have done. You know, we all know that Heyman, you know, a lot of these writers were afraid to question Vince McMahon, right? And Heyman, I think, has enough status with the company and his history that I think he can push back, definitely more than Bischoff can.
Well, and Heyman knows if he didn't work for WWE, he could end up going to AEW because they definitely want him there.
So, oh my God, they would love to have him there.
But yeah, I still like, so Heyman, I'll give the benefit of the doubt because of that track record. All Bischoff's ever done in WWE was on-screen character. Now, what do you think? Will either one of these guys make it to TV? Or do you think they're going to – now, Heyman's obviously still going to be Brock Lesnar's advocate, so not counting that. What do you think? Just behind the scenes, or do you think they're going to be vocal on TV?
I think – they will be behind the scenes 99% of the time, obviously, with the exception being Heyman and Lesnar. But let's face it, Lesnar's there once every few months anyway. I think as we get closer to the big 4 pay-per-views, especially WrestleMania, I have to imagine that they will somehow be in some feud at WrestleMania. We could even end up seeing Eric Bischoff versus Shane McMahon at WrestleMania. You know, crazier things have happened, right? So I think they'll eventually be on TV for sure.
Well, we'll see if the phrase WCW and ECW come back into play.
Survivor Series.
That would be very, very interesting. And of course, let's talk about this too. You brought this up earlier. Triple H now, NXT is his baby.
Yeah.
Now Evolve, which we've always kind of known they've had a working relationship with WWE. I mean, ECW did back in the day.
Yeah.
What do you think of WWE going out of their way now and doing events? So at Fyter Fest, or not Fyter Fest, but the Fallen, whatever that second free one.
Fight for the Fallen, is that what it is?
Fight for the Fallen. Yeah. The Evolve show's happening the same day on the WWE Network.
Yeah.
And then I believe at All Out that same day, NXT UK is airing on the WWE Network. So that's obviously not coincidence anymore. WWE is being reactionary, trying to steal thunder from some of the marks on AEW Day. So what do you think with that?
Look, the biggest weapon in the entire company from a non-performer standpoint is Triple H, okay? We talked about this 6 months ago that AEW kind of already exists in NXT. What better way to go at this competition than with your version, your proven version of what they're trying to create? They could use Triple H now to just take viewers from them, do different things with them, poach other indie talent. And I think Triple H is going to do very well at that. You can't tell me there's a coincidence that this is happening because why can't I think of his name? The cleaner.
Kenny Omega.
God. Huh? Yeah, Kenny Omega. He was pissed. He tweeted out he was pretty upset about it. And then he deleted the tweet, which if you're going to say something, don't delete your tweet. That is such a bitch move. Stand by your words. Even if it's controversial, let it fly, right? I mean, you have to agree with that, Virtue. You're controversy king over here.
Yeah, like deleting tweets, unless you call somebody a plagiarist. But that's another time. But so here's what I'm sitting there thinking. What do you think happens with think about what Triple H is attempting right now with like Evolve and the Indies. Think you have AEW. What do you think's going to happen with Impact and Ring of Honor? Because let's face it, they used to both be number 2, number 3.
Yeah.
But now with WWE and AEW, they're clearly both behind them based on hype, right? AEW still has more to prove. But, I mean, look how Impact TNA has fallen. Ring of Honor started ever since the Young Bucks and Omega and Cody, started AEW. It's like Ring of Honor, the marks are kind of slowly crawling away from that. And they did the whole Enzo and Cass thing, which soured a lot of people, which I still think is great because now Enzo and Cass are getting bookings in the Indies.
Yep.
Do you think that in any way, shape, or form, Anthem, who owns Impact, or that TV network or whatever that company is that owns Ring of Honor might say, let's just get ready. We don't want anything to do with the wrestling business anymore. Well, do you think that Triple H and WWE could poach the rights to both of those, or at least one of them?
Look, WWE, if anyone's a fan of Star Trek, WWE is the Borg. Resistance is futile. Assimilation will happen. They will end up owning. It's only a matter of time before Vince owns TNA, Impact, right? And Ring of Honor, I don't know, man. I would say the next couple of years, if AEW continues to grow and they start feeling that squeeze for money, Borg Vince is going to show up and assimilate the shit out of him. I mean, that's what he does. He did it with all the territories.
Triple H is going to be hungry for that because think about the rights of Ring of Honor in WWE with the wrestlers they have that have came up through NXT.
And the network. Oh, yeah, and they could show all those matches with AJ and, I mean, it's a no-brainer. And even if they don't want the wrestlers or the company name, which they do, they want that library for their network. They are just, like I said, WWE, Vince McMahon is the Borg. They want everything to be WWE, and that's it. They want it for their network because guess what? At $9.99, it's a great deal. There is so much great content on there, and I don't get paid by them. And I'm first minute. It's cheaper than Netflix. It's cheaper than Hulu without commercials. It's cheaper than HBO Go, and it has thousands of hours of stuff on there. If they could add Ring of Honor and Impact, they could easily raise the price to $15 a month and increase their revenue by God knows how much.
Yep. Now let me ask you this: with Heyman back in creative control, and not really worried about Bischoff. Do we get another at some point? Maybe with a newer generation, another ECW one night stand. Coincidentally, I don't know, the same day as the AEW pay-per-view or like the day before. Think about the possibilities with that. The fans love those. They could go back to the Manhattan Center or the whatever those balcony places.
Yeah. So if they're going to do something like that, in my opinion, they should do an NXT takeover one night stand and just tribute to all these guys and just have a really cool show in that Philadelphia arena.
Maybe have a couple old guys just show up, like
have Dreamer show up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that'd be great. I mean, Sandman shows up on Impact. I'm sure you could get him for a 6-pack of beer and a lottery ticket. So why not?
And is there any possibility that we could see the name Nitro come back into play somewhere? WWE owns it. I think these guys are pawns, and Vince is trying to bring back 97, 98, 99.
Of course he is. That's when he made the most money.
In a time of panic, they're panicking because they're clearly worried about AEW, at least to a degree. Especially look at how Seth Rollins is tweeting. You know what I mean? The defense going on now. Seth Rollins, I'm waiting for him to say, well, I'm the Shawn Michaels of this era. Remember Michaels in the mid-'90s when WWE sucked, was carrying the company on his back? Yeah. People joke that's how he ended up hurting his back. Yeah. We know Shawn wasn't the big draw, but, I mean, he still had asses in seats when they could have went bankrupt. He kept them relevant enough as the headliner to Shawn gave Austin, Mr. McMahon, all of those guys the silver, and Brett, too, the silver platter to the Attitude Era. You know what I mean?
Undertaker, yeah,
and Taker, because those guys carried WWE during those horrible gimmick years where they could have folded and Vince, it would have been over. But I don't know, man. It's literally 20 years later, and here we are, Heyman and Bischoff, and I can't fathom why people are so excited. And here's my call. Here's my prediction. It's just a matter of time. Right now, you see most of the internet's happy about this, because they hate Vince McMahon, so they're immediately thinking, oh, change, right? I don't think that until I see it consistently. Until that change, Rob, happens consistently, that's why I hate these hype monkeys, okay? When do these toxic fans that I so often troll on the internet turn on this idea of Heyman and Bischoff? Both of them or just one of them?
SummerSlam.
Like, let's do an over-under. You're saying SummerSlam? That's kind of soon.
Yeah.
I say I'm going to go
3 months is my guess.
Survivor Series, because we'll see how that develops. So my over-under Survivor Series, that the fans will start turning on them, like, what are you guys doing? And that actually gives some traction, too, for Fox, SmackDown on Fox to happen for a month or two. So that's why. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about?
So I just want to say real quick, I did have my girlfriend watch Stomping Ground with me. It was her first wrestling event she's ever watched. And it was kind of neat to see what someone who just isn't jaded and cynical and saturated with dirt sheets and things like that, what they thought of it. And I'm going to say she definitely is a little more like my train of thought. She didn't like some of the really gimmicky stuff. She thought the worm was stupid. She's like, why would they do that? And she didn't, some of the little tropes like that. But she liked everything, and she thought the world title matches both kind of sucked. And I agreed with her. She's like, these are boring. What's happening? She thought the cage match was really stupid too. So it was good to see someone who has no experience watching wrestling had pretty much the same outlook as I did, which shows that I am remarkable. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Sweet. Dude.
Right?
All right. So here's the one last thing I want to close with. So
sure.
Everybody knows I like Chris Jericho. I don't listen to all of his podcasts. I usually binge listen to him, and I get a couple months behind sometimes. After Stomping Grounds, and they're doing this whole Becky and Seth thing, which, when I look at that relationship, I really feel it's a work. But, maybe they're really together. Who cares? But I said, man, it's just a matter of time now for Becky fans to turn on Seth, right? Especially male Becky fans. And female Rollins fans to turn on Becky, right? Because, they want them for themselves. And, of course, little did I know, Jericho basically said the same thing on his podcast a week earlier. Dude, I didn't know. I've listened and watched Jericho enough over the years. I'm not shocked that I said the same thing he did without knowing he said it. Because I've studied him. I kind of know the things he thinks about. What do you think? Do you call bullshit on that? You think I listened to Talk as Jericho and just repeated Jericho's words and then I'm denying it? I want your honest opinion.
I think you're smarter than that. I think if you heard that on Jericho, you would have retweeted or said, I agree with Jericho's same thoughts. Yes, you like to stir the pot, but if there's one thing Virtue is not, is a liar. Virtue, I've heard you admit you're wrong. I've heard you quote sources. I've heard you quote people. And realistically, it's not a super outlandish prediction. Like, if I was in the right state of mind, I probably could have been like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't think of things like that because I don't always think about things the way that you think. But
me coming up with that theory is consistent with the things I always say, right? It's not like hot-shotting a take. I mean, let's be honest. Anything Jericho says, if I heard him say that, I would have immediately retweeted and said, oh, my God, listen to Jericho. I like that opinion.
Also, in your defense,
I didn't know. And of course, people could say, well, if you're such a Jericho fan, why aren't you staying up on his podcasts? Well, I've enjoyed his in-ring work and his kayfabe promos so much. I know when I listen to his podcast, he's out of character again and he's back to normal Chris. And then my suspension of disbelief is gone. That's one reason why I'm kind of like not listening to him all that much, because I love the Jericho character in the wrestling ring.
Yeah.
Right. His podcast is it's no kayfabe.
If anyone in the world is happy when marks turn on marks and marks start being fickle, it's Virtue. So obviously you saying that is right in line with how you think, because you're like, hey, these fickle bastards are going to start hating because of this reason. That is such a Virtue thing to say. I don't know how anyone could deny that. And if they do, they're stupid. So whatever.
Well, I have an email out there. It's nodqvirtue@gmail.com. So if anyone randomly listens to this video, I'm accepting slanderous retractions and apologies to that email, and you might get unblocked. That's all I'm going to say, Rob. You want to take it home and do your plug?
I will do my plug. You guys can follow me at Xenomecha, Xenomecha. I have actually started to gain some followers. It is a miracle, Virtue. I'm coming up in the world. You can catch me here with Virtue. There are a few other places. If you like what you heard here today and you want to hear more Virtue, where can they come to see both of us?
You can see you and I on Wrestling with Virtue over on Andre Corbeil's site. And we actually have a video up over there right now about AEW. So go check that out. And Rob is going to be on the No DQ panel. We have a couple topic ideas. Now it's just getting the whole panel together to do a recording. But finally, that will be your No DQ debut. And right here on the BigVitoBrand.com, it's Virtue and the remarkable Robbie Vice on Virtue's brand of wrestling, which maybe we'll rename it maybe early next year. We'll see how it goes. But that's it, man. Great discussion. We don't always agree. Eric Bischoff is an asshole. But, it is what it is. And so I'm rooting for his failure. And I say that knowing it's not like he needs that money. The guy's rich, right?
Sure.
He could go home and never work again. So that's why I don't feel guilty for saying that.
He's not stopping.
I know the true Eric Bischoff. I've done enough studying and research on him, seen him in person, just don't like the guy. We saw how he rose a wrestling company and at the same time made it crash and burn. People want to blame Vince Russo when in reality Bischoff was already planting the seeds for the implosion of WCW by signing all those wrestlers the money and giving them creative control. Russo was just trying to save the company. That point couldn't do it. That's all I got. So for the remarkable Robbie Vice, I am Virtue. You can follow me on Twitter. Try to troll me on Twitter at @NoDQ_Virtue. We will see you next time. Click.